Have you ever noticed how a simple touch can suddenly change everything between two people? Not just the physical sensation, but something deeper, almost magnetic. Imagine you're sitting across from someone you care about, and with just the way you lightly touch their hand or brush their arm, the entire mood shifts. Suddenly, there's a spark, a silent conversation that words can't quite capture. But what if I told you there's more to this than just chemistry or attraction? What if beneath that touch lies an intricate dance of the psyche, one that Carl Jung might say connects us on the level of our deepest selves? It sounds like something out of a romantic movie, right? But this idea that a certain kind of touch can make someone almost crave your presence, almost plead for more, has a psychological root that goes beyond surface-level intimacy. It taps into the invisible threads woven by unconscious patterns, archetypes buried in all of us since birth. Let me take you into a moment from my own life that made this clear. A few years ago, I met a woman named Elisa in a cafe not far from the banks of the Charles River in Boston. The sun was setting, the sky had this faint pinkish glow that felt like it was holding its breath. Elisa was a graphic designer, thoughtful and sharp, but guarded too. We'd talked for hours about art and music, but never quite about what really mattered to her, the parts she kept hidden. One evening, as we walked through Harvard Square under flickering street lamps, I reached out and gently touched her shoulder to guide her through the crowd. It was unassuming, nothing dramatic, but then something shifted in her eyes. She paused and looked back at me, as if realizing something she hadn't before. What she didn't know was that this simple gesture was stirring not only warmth, but an unconscious recognition, something primal and deeply human. Here's where Jung's insights become fascinating. He believed our psyche is layered with symbolic images called archetypes, universal patterns shared by everyone across cultures and time. These aren't just ideas, they are living forces within us that shape our feelings and reactions, often without us even noticing. When you touch someone in a way that resonates with these deep patterns, say care, protection, vulnerability, you're not merely reaching their skin, you're touching an echo inside them. Now pause for a second, because this gets tricky. It's not about any touch being powerful. It's about how that touch connects with their inner world. There's an old story Jung recounted about two people whose meeting felt like fate, not because they said much, but because their gestures spoke volumes. The man would tap the woman's hand lightly each time he wanted to reassure her during anxious moments. Over time, this small act became a secret language between them, one filled with trust and longing. So how do we understand this in everyday life without getting lost in mysticism? Think about those times when you've been comforted just by someone holding your hand during stress, not because they said everything will be fine, which often doesn't help, but because their presence showed they were truly there with you. In recent months, I've seen how people relate differently now after long periods of isolation brought on by global events. We are starved for connection more than ever. That brief contact can either feel healing or overwhelming, depending on what unconscious messages it triggers inside us. This is why Jung warned against assuming all connections happen consciously. To bring it closer, imagine Sarah, a 29-year-old social worker living in Chicago who recently started dating again after a tough breakup in 2023. During their first dinner together at a cozy Italian place near Lincoln Park, her date hesitated to initiate contact. But when he finally brushed her hand while laughing at a joke she made, a small moment, it unlocked something unexpected inside her. Both vulnerability and desire to get closer. But Sarah also felt uneasy afterward. Not because she disliked the gesture, but because part of her wasn't ready yet to expose those hidden layers of herself. Here's where your awareness becomes key. Being mindful not only of what kind of touch you offer, but when and how it lands emotionally for the other person is crucial. So let me share something practical to try next time when you want to create that deeper connection through touch, not as manipulation or technique, but as genuine dialogue between souls who are willing to meet on their own terms. First exercise. Pay attention during your next meaningful conversation with someone close, whether partner or friend, to moments when silence fills the space between words. At one such moment, reach out gently, maybe a light tap on their forearm or resting your hand briefly over theirs, and observe closely what shifts internally for both of you. Don't rush it. Let the feeling develop naturally. And here comes an interesting part. Resist the urge to fill that silence immediately afterward with chatter or reassurance. Let the gesture speak its own language first. This way, you honor not only your own nervous system's response, but also theirs, a mutual respect for inner rhythms Jung described as essential for real relationship building. Oh, and if you're curious about diving deeper into these layers of human connection grounded in psychology without turning it into self-help jargon, subscribe to the channel so we can explore these themes together more often. It might seem simple, a touch here or there, but think about it like tuning an old radio. Sometimes frequency adjustments are subtle yet profound enough to catch signals others miss entirely. To sum up this first part without sounding too neat, touching someone affects far more than muscles or skin cells. It reaches fragments within us shaped by history we don't always recall, yet live through unconsciously every day. What happens next is unique for each person, and understanding that is where true empathy starts to unfold. But wait, there's another layer here that's easy to overlook. And yes, I realize we've wandered quite deeply already. If you've ever been unsure why certain touches make your heart race while others barely register, or wondered if it's something only romantic partners experience, you might find it surprising how much these subtle interactions shape everyday relationships beyond romance alone, including friendships and family ties. And since feeling understood often hinges on our capacity to communicate beyond words, sometimes awkwardly trying, recognizing these patterns brings relief rather than pressure. The relief knowing connection isn't just random chance, but patterned dialogue beneath awareness. Before moving further, though, reflect on recent moments when someone touched you unexpectedly, maybe during stressful times or joyful occasions. And how did your body respond? Did it invite closeness or trigger pulling away? Your answers hold clues worth exploring gently alongside others willing to listen without judgment. Honestly, sometimes we all mess this up, touching too soon or missing cues completely, myself included. That's human nature, not flaw, but opportunity wrapped awkwardly, in itself inviting patience toward ourselves and others who stumble along too. So yeah, if any of this makes sense so far, or even puzzles you, I'm curious. What's one memory where touch changed everything for you? Share if you'd like. It helps remind us we're navigating these mysterious waters together rather than alone in silence. Anyway, back to why specific touches invoke longing rather than indifference. The key is resonance with individual inner dynamics shaped by past experiences, plus innate patterns ingrained from birth, which means no magic formula fits everyone neatly. Spoiler alert. But what does fit universally is how genuine attention paired with gentle physical presence sparks recognition beneath surface levels, a spark so subtle yet potent it sometimes catches us off guard until we realize we want more, not just physically, but emotionally too. Imagine giving someone permission simply by presence, that you're willing to be seen beyond facades without rushing judgments, a quiet invitation embodied through calm contact rather than frantic gestures screaming, "Notice me." Sounds simple enough? Almost boring? Yes, but therein lies its power. The paradox that real intimacy often grows quietly instead of loudly shouting for attention. I remember interviewing a therapist named David based in Portland last year who said his patients often described moments when a hand on my back during crisis made them feel safest, even safer than verbal promises could ever provide. That stuck with me because it highlights again how deeply embodied experiences shape our psychic reality. So here's another experiment worth trying immediately after watching this video. At some point today or tomorrow morning, touch your own wrist softly with your opposite hand while breathing slowly 3 times. Notice what emerges emotionally, noticing sensations like warmth or tension without pushing away discomfort. This small self-touch exercise may sound trivial compared to connecting with others physically, but believe me, it opens pathways toward greater self-awareness, essential before reaching outward authentically. And if curiosity strikes about making sense of those emotional signals activated by touch, there's plenty more ahead in our series exploring these subtle layers step by step. For now, though, remember, your hands aren't just limbs. They're bridges linking inner worlds silently, yet profoundly, when used mindfully. That said, I'm guessing some folks watching might be thinking, okay, cool theory, but how do I avoid coming off awkward or creepy? Fair question. Because cultural norms vary widely, even within single cities nowadays, sometimes making physical gestures confusing territory altogether. One piece of advice: start with observation first, before initiating touch. Watch body language cues carefully, like leaning in slightly versus retracting. If uncertain, wait longer rather than acting prematurely, even if patience feels boring compared to instant gratification culture surrounding us constantly nowadays. It might sound counterintuitive, given so many apps promote speed dating styles where swipe fast rules everything. But slowing down offers richer texture, in line with Jung's notion that unconscious material reveals itself gradually when conditions feel safe enough rather than forced abruptly. Anyway, thanks for hanging out so far. You're already stepping into territory most skip over, despite being so vital. If anything resonated here or made you pause, and maybe even smile at memories triggered, I'd love hearing from you below sometime soon. No pressure though. We'll keep unfolding these mysteries gently together, little by little. Next time, we'll peek into why certain touches activate deep-seated fears instead, and what that tells us about hidden parts clamoring for acknowledgement underneath polite facades. Until then, notice those quiet moments between gestures. They carry messages waiting patiently to be heard if we allow space beyond rushing past sensations superficially. And maybe don't underestimate power held quietly inside fingertips, resting lightly somewhere important. You know, after thinking about how touch can awaken those quiet, almost forgotten parts inside us, I realized there's a shadow side to it, something that often flies under the radar. It's not just about creating desire or connection. Sometimes touch can stir up old wounds we didn't even realize were there. This is where things get complicated, because a touch that's meant to be gentle can unexpectedly trigger discomfort or even push someone away. And it's not because the touch itself was wrong in any obvious sense. It's that beneath the skin lies a network of memories and feelings tangled with past hurts or betrayals. Take, for instance, Alex, a 42-year-old software developer living in Austin. He recently started dating someone new after years of avoiding intimacy following a difficult divorce. One evening at a jazz club downtown, his date reached out and put her hand lightly on his knee, a seemingly caring gesture. But instead of warmth, Alex felt a rush of anxiety he couldn't explain at first. That simple touch unearthed an inner alarm he'd been suppressing since his marriage ended, an echo from when physical closeness had become associated with control and pain. It's fascinating how the body remembers what the mind might try to forget. This brings us to something Jung explored deeply, how our personal unconscious holds patterns shaped by our unique life experiences, but also intertwined with universal human themes. When someone touches us, especially in vulnerable places like hands or arms, it can awaken those hidden responses not only related to present feelings, but also past narratives lodged within us. So here's a second layer of understanding. When you reach out physically, it's vital to be aware not just of your intentions, but also of what might be stirring beneath the surface for the other person, even if they themselves don't fully grasp it yet. Now, here's a practical approach that could help both sides navigate this delicate terrain without misunderstanding or overwhelm. Next time you find yourself wanting to initiate touch during conversation or when comforting someone, try this small pause before contact. Silently ask yourself 2 questions internally. 1. Am I ready to receive whatever response may come, comfort or resistance? And 2, can I stay present without trying to fix or interpret what unfolds? This might sound simple, but imagine applying this tiny ritual as a way of honoring the complexity beneath that brief contact, instead of rushing in with assumptions. I remember reading about a psychotherapist in Seattle who encourages clients to use this mindful pause when entering intimate spaces, not only romantic ones, but friendships or family dynamics too. To cultivate empathy grounded in patience rather than expectation. Try it out sometime soon, the next time you feel drawn toward offering comfort through touch, and see what shifts occur inside you and between you and the other person. That moment of hesitating intentionally before connecting can transform what follows from accidental triggering into conscious exchange. Now, shifting gears slightly, but still within this realm, have you ever noticed how sometimes people crave touch almost desperately, not because they feel safe necessarily, but because something inside them is crying out for acknowledgement? There's an interesting paradox here. While some withdraw from physical contact due to fear or pain, others seek it obsessively, as if filling an emptiness no words can reach. Jung touched on this dynamic without naming it directly. That deep yearning for connection often masks deeper wounds where parts of ourselves feel unseen or unvalued. Let me tell you about Mia, a 27-year-old barista in Brooklyn who confided once how she felt addicted to hugs and casual touches from friends and strangers alike after feeling isolated during long stretches of remote work in 2022. She said these touches were like lifelines pulling her out of foggy loneliness, but at times left her drained emotionally afterward because they never quite satisfied the hunger beneath. This hunger isn't simply about wanting affection on the surface. It's about unmet needs for validation and presence that have been ignored too long internally. And it leads me to another concept worth exploring today: how different parts inside us hold varying needs around touch, which means that even within one person, there might be conflict between craving closeness and fearing invasion simultaneously. Here's where things get really interesting psychologically, because we tend to think of ourselves as consistent, whole beings, but in truth, we're composed of many facets, sometimes at odds with each other. When you understand that tension between longing for closeness and needing boundaries, it becomes easier to approach both yourself and others with gentleness rather than frustration. So, what might help here? An exercise I suggest involves tuning into your body consciously throughout your day, especially during moments involving physical proximity with others, and mentally checking in. Which part of me right now wants connection? Then quickly follow up with, which part feels hesitant or overwhelmed? Write down whatever feelings arise, even contradictions, and allow space for them instead of pushing toward immediate resolution. Over time, this practice nurtures internal dialogue between conflicting parts, so you become more fluent in managing your own needs around touch, and by extension, create safer space when engaging physically with others too. Oh, and if any part of this resonates with your experience, or even if you're curious why some touches leave you unsettled while others bring ease, please share below sometime. Hearing diverse stories helps remind us all we're navigating these complexities together rather than alone behind closed doors. Moving forward naturally now, there is yet another dimension often overlooked when discussing touch and longing: timing. Not just when we initiate contact, but how often and in what rhythm we engage physically matters deeply for sustaining desire without exhaustion or alienation. Curiously enough, modern culture, with its hyperspeed communication tools like instant messaging apps and social media platforms, has shaped expectations around immediacy, not only verbally, but physically as well. The rise of dating apps promoting fast-paced interactions encourages people to make moves quickly, sometimes before true emotional groundwork is laid. Remember Sophia? She's a yoga instructor from Miami who shared how she felt overwhelmed dating online during 2023 holidays when everyone seemed eager for instant intimacy, including physical closeness. She said she noticed feeling pressure, not just internally, but sensed through her date's gestures too. Touches arriving prematurely often left her confused rather than comforted. This phenomenon points toward an important principle. Sustainable desire thrives on pacing aligned with mutual readiness, not rushed encounters forced by external timelines or social expectations. Think back on times when anticipation built gradually over days or weeks before finally sharing meaningful physical moments. That tension created space for appreciation rather than obligation. What does this look like practically? Try spacing out your physical engagements deliberately if possible, allowing time between moments so both parties can process sensations emotionally without being flooded suddenly by intense contact repeatedly within short intervals. It might feel awkward initially. Who enjoys waiting, especially amid cultural pressures demanding quick results? Hello, TikTok culture. But slowing down offers richer texture where longing can breathe, instead of suffocating under constant stimulation overload common today. Another useful step involves open communication around boundaries, not necessarily heavy talks, but subtle check-ins like, "How are you feeling about us moving closer right now?" which creates invitations rather than demands, ensuring consent remains dynamic over time. Imagine John and Layla, a couple living in New Orleans, who adopted this mindful pacing after attending couples therapy last year, following several misunderstandings fueled by mismatched expectations about physical affection frequency. They found that respecting each other's rhythms rebuilt trust and desire simultaneously, without either feeling pressured, a delicate balance, maintaining excitement yet honoring comfort zones. To try yourself, if you notice urges escalating rapidly toward more frequent touching early on, or vice versa, try slowing down consciously by inserting small pauses between gestures, for example, stepping back briefly before resuming gentle contact. Observe how this tempo shift affects emotional tone between both participants. It may reveal previously unnoticed currents beneath surface actions, otherwise lost amid haste. We often underestimate timing's role simply because touching seems immediate, sensation-based, but timing connects deeply with psychological readiness too. So yes, rhythm matters as much as touch itself. And hey, I'm guessing some watching may feel skeptical here, thinking, sounds nice, but isn't real life messier? Absolutely. Real life always throws curveballs, and awkward moments aplenty. This approach isn't magic instant fix either, more like ongoing dance, requiring attentiveness plus humor when missteps happen. Spoiler alert, they will. Anyway, curious if anyone has experienced shifts in desire or connection simply by changing pace? Let me know below sometime. It's fascinating hearing how subtle timing adjustments ripple emotionally beyond immediate moments themselves. And since we're diving into nuances behind why certain touches ignite craving while others fall flat or overwhelm, I'd mention there's one final angle worth exploring next time, involving how unconscious stories shape reactions profoundly beyond mere physicality. But before jumping ahead, I'll leave you today with 2 exercises tied closely together. First, review recent interactions involving touch where your emotions varied widely, from warmth to discomfort, and write down what feelings surfaced alongside possible triggers linked either consciously remembered events or vague sensations hard to name precisely. Second, experiment tomorrow using rhythmic pacing intentionally during conversations, incorporating casual touching, alternate brief contact, then slight withdrawal deliberately, observing emotional landscape unfolding inside self and partner, friend. These combined practices don't promise overnight miracles, but they cultivate slow awareness, essential for nuanced relationships, reflecting whole human complexity. Jung pointed toward always beyond superficial appearances alone. And again, if these reflections spark questions or stories from your own experience, don't hesitate sharing them below. Learning unfolds best collectively, after all. Onward then, to uncover more layers gently together soon. It's curious how we often think of touch purely as a means to communicate affection, desire, or comfort, but there's a subtler dimension rarely talked about: how touch serves as a mirror reflecting our own relationship with vulnerability and trust. Not just how we relate to others, but how we relate to ourselves through the physical connection we allow or resist. Let me explain what I mean by this. Imagine touch as a kind of invitation, not only inviting someone else in, but also inviting parts of ourselves that might be protective, shy, or even skeptical to step forward. This echoes Jung's idea that beneath our conscious personality lie various sub-personalities, or facets of self that emerge depending on circumstance. Each part has its own voice, hesitations, and desires. Some parts want closeness fiercely, others recoil at even the gentlest touch because it feels risky or unfamiliar. So when you reach out physically or receive a touch, you're not just engaging with the other person's skin, but with these multiple layers inside you too. Your body becomes a stage where these inner dialogues play out silently. To illustrate this, consider Lucas, a 35-year-old chef living in San Francisco, who shared with me an experience from last winter. He'd been struggling with opening up emotionally after years of focusing solely on work and achievements. One evening, while cooking for friends, a close companion unexpectedly put their hand lightly on his wrist, a spontaneous gesture during laughter that cracked open something inside him. not because he was suddenly comfortable emotionally, but because that touch met resistance and longing at once. It felt like his guarded self and his yearning self talking through that contact. This delicate tension between invitation and resistance is precisely what makes touch so powerful and complicated. Here's an exercise inspired by this idea. Next time you find yourself in proximity to someone, partner, friend, or even family member, before initiating contact, pause briefly and ask internally, which parts of me are willing to be seen right now? Which parts are hesitant? Then offer your hand or arm gently, not rushing, and notice what emotions arise within you, as well as any subtle shifts in the other person. Try not to judge what comes up. Simply observe it, like watching waves moving naturally on the ocean surface, sometimes gentle ripples, sometimes sudden swells. This practice encourages you to recognize your internal multiplicity actively during physical exchanges, rather than ignoring or suppressing feelings that don't fit neat narratives about connection. It's an invitation toward compassionate self-awareness embedded directly in moments of touch. And here's the beautiful thing. The more you allow these fragmented parts space to show up safely, even if they contradict each other, the richer your capacity becomes for authentic relationship, grounded not in perfection, but realness. Now, let me take a brief detour before we bring all this together, a kind of personal confession, if you will. I've often thought myself somewhat clumsy when it comes to reading signals around touch, maybe too eager sometimes or overly cautious other times. And yet, those moments where I dared slow down to sense my own inner hesitations made all the difference in how others responded. Turns out, vulnerability isn't some grand, heroic act reserved for special occasions. It's small choices, repeated daily, from how softly you rest your palm on someone's back during tough times, to allowing your own trembles without masking them behind bravado. So yeah, embracing imperfection within those gestures connects us deeply, more than polished moves ever could. All right, now as we approach the end, let's gently weave together what began as a question about how touch can ignite longing into something broader about human connection itself. In all these layers, from unconscious archetypes stirring under skin to personal histories etched in muscle memory, from craving closeness masking unmet needs to timing rhythms creating space for desire, and finally, recognizing that each physical interaction invites dialogue among many internal selves, we see that what seems simple really isn't so simple at all. Touch reveals complexity beneath apparent ease, complexity inviting patience over rush, curiosity over assumptions, empathy over control. And here lies profound hope for those feeling isolated or misunderstood by their own reactions toward intimacy, that within every hesitation lies potential for deeper understanding, not failure. And within every longing lies opportunity for authentic meeting beyond masks worn daily. What if, instead of fearing getting it wrong, we embraced those awkward pauses? What if, instead of pushing away uncomfortable feelings emerging from contact, we welcomed them as messages from parts needing care? These reflections transform our perspective from seeing touch purely as physical act producing immediate results into appreciating it as ongoing conversation layered with psychological richness, demanding respect and kindness inwardly and outwardly. Ultimately, connecting through touch becomes metaphor for connecting with whole selves, including shadows, as essential step toward relationships reflecting true human complexity rather than superficial harmony. So here's a closing exercise, inviting you beyond intellectual knowing toward embodied presence. Find a quiet moment today or soon when alone. Place one hand gently over your heart area and breathe slowly 3 times. As you do this, imagine silently greeting parts inside you hesitant about closeness, alongside parts yearning deeply for it alike. Welcome them both without judgment. Rest there briefly, noticing sensations arising without pushing away discomfort or clinging solely onto pleasant feelings. This small ritual echoes bigger invitation ongoing whenever real physical contact happens. Invitation to meet ourselves fully first before offering connection outwardly. I'm curious, does this resonate? Does it spark something fragile yet potent within? Before we part, let me leave you with one thought quietly unfolding inside me after years exploring these themes. The most powerful touches aren't always those filled with passion or drama. They're often the subtle ones, carrying presence, willing to sit beside another human being amid silence fraught with contradictions, where words fail but honesty breathes freely. They say actions speak louder than words, but sometimes action is simply being there, in stillness, with hands open, gently, rather than clenched tightly, hoping for control. That kind of openness invites reciprocity far beyond immediate gratification into a realm where longing transforms not by force, but by patient acceptance unfolding naturally over time. And isn't that maybe what true intimacy always was, underneath cultural scripts promising quick fixes? Not performance, nor perfection, but humble acceptance paired with courage enough to face uncertainty together, however messy it gets. If this sparks anything inside, a flicker of hope, recognition, or even skepticism, I welcome hearing from you sometime down below. Because conversation doesn't end here, but begins anew through shared reflection. Thank you for staying curious enough to journey alongside today. I truly believe these subtle explorations can ripple quietly, yet powerfully, changing how we relate to ourselves first, and then, inevitably, to everyone else around us too. Until next time, may your hands find ways to speak truths words cannot reach, and may your heart listen closely when they do.